It was easy to tell which callers were regular security officers and which were adjudicators. The officers were loud, panicked, and shouting about shit nobody could do anything about. None of them had ever seen action like this before, and they were already out of their depths when riots broke out. They were not equipped or prepared for an all-out battle on the streets of their beloved Sky City. The adjudicators had better weapons and were emotionally equipped for the fight. Having met her fair share of them, Claire assumed they liked the idea of being caught in the middle of a battle for the city, even if they were wildly outnumbered. If they won under these conditions, it would make the glory even greater. If they lost, it wouldn't matter, since they would be dead. She had a feeling most of them viewed the situation that way. Russet hadn't said as much when they dropped her off at the agency, which was still under siege, but she'd heavily implied it. At least she was helping fight the battle instead of hiding away and letting it all blow over. Whoever took over would want the surviving adjudicators to keep the city in check when they were done. They wouldn't kill all the civilians, even if they planned on colonizing the place. Hell, even if they wanted to drive the city back to the surface, the surviving adjudicators would be one hell of an asset. From what she understood about how they were trained, they weren't interested in life on the ground. They could live like kings if they ever went down, but the few who did were the exception, not the rule. She had looked into how they were trained and selected, but she still didn't know how they chose kids who wouldn't have any ambition beyond raising the profile of the agency as a whole. A few slipped past their screening, but even they had those impulses battered down to the point where they were merely a shell of what they'd once been. All that training worked as intended. Adjudicators earned their legend with every fight, every skirmish on the streets of Summerland City. They were the only reason the city hadn't already been taken, and they were making the invaders pay for every step they took. Snipers had been set up across the city to slow the advances down to the point where the invaders needed to call in airstrikes, drawing their air support away from the battle in the sky to give themselves room to move. Claire remembered reading the adjudicator program had once been designed to front the human fight against the monsters on the ground. It had since been adapted to a police force, but the ideals behind their training remained the same. They were proving its brutal effectiveness as the battle continued. "What does the advance look like?" She glanced toward Anselm approaching their hijacked shuttle. His face was scratched and blood soaked his coat. His eyes held the dead look that told her he had retreated into the special place in the back of his head to let his body do what it had been trained to do for decades. "Hmm?" she responded. "The advance. We're still clearing civilians out of the core city buildings, but it looks like the airstrikes are following them in."